Hello, mate. How are you? I hope very well. I'll tell you where we are today. The squares at the gates of Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich are named after Professor Huber and the Scholl siblings. Along with other young people, they formed the White Rose, a group that paid with their lives for having the courage to oppose Nazism. These pamphlets, embedded among the cobblestones at the university entrance, honor those brave individuals whose story I will tell you today. But first, to understand it better, we have to forget about what the universities we know are like and delve a little into what this university was like during the era of the White Rose. Nazism and other right-wing expressions were popular among university professors in Munich even before Hitler came to power. Regarding racism and anti-Semitism, it is enough to say that as early as 1923, a chair of racial hygiene had already been established at this university, which was the first in all of Germany. And that same year, it is estimated that around 70% of the students at this university supported the failed coup led by Hitler, the so-called Beer Hall Putsch. When Hitler was appointed Chancellor in 1933, it became common to see students in Nazi stormtrooper uniforms, the feared SA, in these hallways. Very soon, like every German institution, the universities were completely Nazified. Walter Wust, Dean of the Faculty of Philosophy and Himmler's trusted man, who taught Aryan culture and linguistics, was appointed Führer Rector of the university and used to wear his SS uniform within this establishment. It is in this context that the actions of the White Rose become significant. In the spring of 1942, a group of students from the University of Munich decided to resist Nazism. They called themselves the White Rose, and the first to take the initiative were Hans Scholl and Alexander Schmorell. Christoph Probst, Sophie Scholl, Hans's younger sister, Willy Graf, and Professor Kurt Huber later joined them. Many of their friends were sympathizers of the White Rose. In its short life, the White Rose wrote and distributed 6 pamphlets calling on the people to resist the National Socialist regime. Initially, they sent them by mail and personally placed them in private mailboxes. At the beginning of 1943, they also began to stealthily roam the streets of Munich at night to paint slogans against Hitler and his regime on the city walls. In the mornings, the citizens of Munich could read phrases such as "Hitler is a mass murderer," or the most powerful and simple slogan of all time, "Freedom." The downfall of the group occurred while they were distributing the 6th pamphlet. Seeking to have more impact, the Scholl siblings took the risk of carrying the copies themselves to distribute them in every corner of the university. They did this during the last class shift on February 18, 1943, hoping that each student could find a leaflet as they left. They were unlucky, and a maintenance man discovered them. Oppressive regimes rely on the denunciation by ordinary citizens like that. The maintenance employee caught the Scholl siblings and took them to the rector's office. Eyewitnesses reported later. They did not resist, simply closed their briefcase and walked calmly with the maintenance employee. That afternoon, they were taken to the Gestapo headquarters for interrogation, and when their house was searched, the police found envelopes, stamps, and addresses of other group members. The 6 members who had formed the White Rose were arrested and days later were tried by a people's court on charges of conspiracy. All of them were sentenced to death by guillotine at Stadelheim prison. At number 13 Franz-Joseph-Strasse, very close to the university, a small plaque commemorates that the Scholl siblings lived at the back of this building. It was from here they went out that night with a briefcase full of pamphlets, trying to awaken the German people's conscience. At number 28 Mandelstrasse, a plaque reminds that Willy Graf and his sister Anneliese lived here until they were arrested by the Gestapo. It is interesting to note that each of the 6 members of the White Rose initially had different reasons for rejecting Nazi ideology. They were united by the desire for a more just society and the courage to act. Hans Scholl was born in 1918. Like so many 15-year-olds, he was drawn to the human tide led by Hitler and joined the Hitler Youth, becoming a group leader. However, very soon he began to feel displeased with Nazi values and made contact with nationalist youth groups that had been banned. This transgression earned him several weeks under arrest in 1937 at the age of 19. As soon as he had started his medical studies, he was sent to the Battle of France. Following that experience, he wrote the first 4 pamphlets with his friend Alexander Schmorell in June and July of 1942. As part of the medical corps, he was sent to the front once more, now to Eastern Europe. There he was outraged to see the war crimes committed by the SS and the Wehrmacht against civilian populations. This strengthened his convictions about the need to oppose Hitler's government. Sophie Scholl was 3 years younger than her brother. She was born in 1921. She was also initially drawn to the idea of a communal life supposedly promoted by Nazism, and joined the League of German Girls. She trained as a kindergarten teacher and in 1942 began studies in philosophy and biology. When her brother told her about the White Rose, she joined immediately. The jailers, witnesses of her final moments, reported that she walked upright and without fear toward the guillotine. Among her writings survived a phrase that says, "Such a magnificent sunny day, and I'm going to die. But how many are dying on the battlefield? How many young lives full of hope? What does my life matter if our actions make thousands of people rise?" Kathy Schenken thought that the worst crimes of humanity are committed by people who remain passive, saying they are just striving to survive. Alexander Schmorell was born in 1917 in Russia, where his mother was from. His father was German, and the family moved to Munich. He rejected Nazism as immoral from the start, and his critical view increased when Germany invaded Russia, his mother's homeland. In the second leaflet, he included information about the massacre of Jews in Eastern Europe. Christoph Probst was born in 1919, and his rejection of Nazism was based on his Christian humanist values. Like Hans Scholl, he had begun his medical studies after serving in the army. He was married and had children, which is why he tried to stay somewhat on the sidelines when they distributed the leaflets. However, he was caught after the wave of arrests following the raid on the Scholl's apartment, and when searching his house, the police found original versions of the leaflets. Willy Graf was born in 1918. He had been active in Catholic youth groups until they were banned by the Nazis. Despite direct threats and intense social pressure, he refused to join the Hitler Youth. He also served as a doctor at the front because he was a medical student in 1940 and met his White Rose companions upon resuming his studies in Munich. It was their contacts in other parts of Germany that made the activities of the White Rose known, despite the Nazis' efforts to prevent it by any means. Professor Kurt Huber was born in 1893 and had been a scholar at the University of Munich since 1920. In political terms, he was conservative, and that is why he found Nazism repugnant. On more than one occasion, he had made critical comments about National Socialism during his classes, which were attended by Sophie Scholl. He was the only academic involved in the activities of the White Rose, and it was he who designed the general lines of the 6th leaflet, drafted after the Nazi defeat in Stalingrad. Stadelheim prison, just a few minutes from the center of Munich, was founded in 1894, and even today is one of the largest in the country. Thousands of opponents of the Nazi regime were guillotined here, including members of the White Rose.
La tombe de Fleur, the grave of the Scholl siblings, is in the Perlacher Forest Cemetery, where the remains of their friend Christoph Probst also rest. Part of the judicial process took place in courtroom number 253 of the Palace of Justice. It has been renamed the White Rose Room and offers a permanent exhibition that includes documents and photographs of the trial. None of the officials who judged and condemned these heroic students were brought to justice after the war, and the vast majority continued in their jobs. The Scholl siblings stood out for their integrity and courage before that infamous court. The majestic atrium of the university, which was remodeled after the war, is dedicated to the memory of the White Rose. In 1961, the White Rose organ, built by the Steinmeier Company, was installed. Since 1997, there has been a very comprehensive permanent exhibition in the brief and unforgettable history of the White Rose right behind the atrium. Thanks to Helmuth, James Graf von Moltke, an active young member of the resistance related to Willy Graf, the 6th leaflet reached England, and during the Allied bombings of the summer of 1943, thousands of copies were dropped over German soil by aircraft of the British Royal Air Force. What the brave young people of the White Rose had set out to achieve was fulfilled, at least in part. Their message was read by thousands of their compatriots. Since 1990, the work of the artist Robert Schmidt-Matt has ensured that we remember the White Rose every time we enter or leave the university. I hope you liked today's video. Don't forget to leave a like or comment, share it with your friends, as this really helps me a lot in growing Chet V. A big hug. Bye.